What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Dream Chasers Ground Zero. Today I have with us Timmy Douglas. Timmy, would you mind just sharing a story with us of what we like to call your personal ground zero moment and just some things that you learned from that along the way to help you get to where you are today?
Yeah, man, for sure. Um, first I want to say thank you for bringing me on the show. I appreciate it. I love sharing my story. And my personal ground zero moment was probably quitting football. I had played football my whole life throughout high school. I was really good at it. I was really good with my grades. Like I finished 11th in my class of I don't know, like 500 plus students or something like that. So I'd spent my whole kind of young life being really good at what other people wanted for my life. But I hated my whole life. Like it was just like I didn't like anything about it. So when I graduated high school, some things that happened in high school where I was like, okay, I need to change my life. And the actual moment of change came with my first decision to quit football, which happened. I was at kind of fall training camp for football, and I'm Christian, really believe in Christ, and I was praying. I was like, um, if you really want me to stay here and play football for the next 4 years, let me know. And if you don't, let me know. And so I was listening to a sermon by Stephen Furtick, and he talked about his, stronghold, and how a stronghold is something that keeps you bitter, but keeps you safe. And for those who are listening right now that are like, yeah, well, I've prayed and I've never kind of received anything from the prayer. I was in that same boat until this very moment. Like there have been like 2 or 3 times where I've actually had a gut feeling come as a result of prayer. And this was one of them. Stephen Furtick was talking about strongholds, keeps you bitter, keeps you safe. That was football. That was my whole life. I hated my life, but it kept me safe from the judgment of other people. And at the end of that sermon, he was like, get out of your stronghold. I was like, Jesus, that's a clear enough signal for me. I went and quit that day, and hence started the rest of my life up until now.
Dude, that is so powerful. I'm like kind of blown away here for a second. Like that's amazing. So I mean, I relate to that so deeply because I had somewhat of a similar experience when I had to step away from basketball. So I totally understand the sports kind of psychology thing there. Mine was a little bit different, but we won't go ahead and dive into that. Today's about your story, not mine. But I just want you to know that I definitely relate to kind of what you were saying there. But dude, that is just so powerful. I feel like so many of us out there right now have that like a stronghold, and I've never heard it put that way, but I really like it a lot actually. That we have this thing that we're holding on to so dearly that I mean we just are holding on to for dear life, yet it makes us miserable. And
Yep.
and when you put it like that, it really just makes you wonder, okay, why am I doing it? Why am I holding on to that? Like, what is it really doing for me? Absolutely nothing, but here I am still holding on to it. And I will admit, like, I definitely understand that too. Like, I mean, for essentially my entire life, I mean, and still to some people, like, I was known as a basketball player. I was the kid that jumped really high and that, did all this, that, and the other. Like, that's how people knew me. Oh, that's the kid that dunks. Oh, that's the kid that does this and that. Like, and that's how people knew who I was. Like, and that was it. So really, like, I understand that identity crisis type of feeling when you try to step away from that and you don't know really who you are outside of that because you don't know what other people think outside of that. But you have to kind of realize that that's not what is most important in that moment. And this is where, like, for me, it really took a lot of like internal searching where I had to realize, like, okay, I do enjoy this, but this isn't forever. And I do have to realize like that there are other things that I want out of my life. And is this serving that? At the time, no. And really, I just got to the point that that was my stronghold. I felt so bitter, but that's where I also felt safe. And as you said, you have to step out of that. And then immediately after that, like kind of like you've already mentioned, like I know, and I do want to hear further into this story too, because I know for me, pretty much right after I stepped out of that, like it did take a little bit of time, but this little snowball started rolling of what I actually wanted. So, like, kind of segueing off of that, I want to hear if you obviously if you're willing, like the continuation off of this story, because I know like football was your life up until this point. What shift did you make after that, and then kind of like what events kind of seem to follow.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, man. Well, for this story, you got to know two things kind of that happened before I quit football. When I was 14, I decided I wasn't going to be broke because I grew up broke. My family grew up struggling. Money kind of was a constant stressor in my family. And one of the things that has kind of torn us apart and kept us apart. And because of that, I made a commitment to myself that I was going to be financially free one day. And so that's the first thing you got to know. The second thing you got to know is before I quit football, we had this thing called Stride at Davidson College, which was like you kind of get all, it was a predominantly white institution. So they had a program for the people of color that were freshmen coming into the school, and they would ask you questions, kind of try to build community. And there was this question that they asked. They said, what emotion is hardest for you to control? And I had to think about this for a second. And I was like, I can control my anger. I can control my sadness. Nobody's going to know when I'm mad. Nobody's going to know when I'm sad. Nobody's really going to know when I'm feeling anything. But the one thing I can't control is my happiness. And that, man, blew my mind and blew a lot of the people's minds who were in the building because I couldn't control my happiness. And I think a lot of people have a similar feeling. So you got to know those two things before you know how I moved forward. Now, how I moved forward after quitting football was I was really focused on football was my kind of golden ticket. It was like how I was going to make money. I was going to go to the league. I thought that was the only way to make money. So I had to figure out new ways to make money to still hit my goal of financial freedom. That was real estate. Started learning about real estate, got onto biggerpockets.com, started doing some wholesaling stuff, some flipping stuff. And I was trying and failing because I wasn't committing. And that was kind of my whole college career. But in addition to like doing real estate and learning about real estate and just learning about success in general, like reading a lot of success literature, I also really pursued love in my life because I was like, I can't control my happiness. I got to understand this thing called love. And I met some people who kind of exemplified love and had a relationship with Christ that I wanted. So I started hanging out with them and I became a young life leader. And that's kind of what took up my time after I left football. I jumped into young life, which there's a bit more to that story as well, but that's kind of where I'm going to stop it. I'm going to let you kind of interject now.
I think being able to find that community after is really one of the most important things. And I will say that it took me a long time to kind of find that group, but I was eventually able to find that through a mentor. But just, I think finding that group of people that kind of act like what you sort of want to be like or the direction that you want to go is really powerful because like when you start hanging around those people, like you ever noticed how like if somebody goes on a vacation for, I mean, any like an extended period, like not for just a couple of days, but like they'll come back with a slight accent, or like when you hang around people with an accent, you kind of start to talk like them. Or I mean, I know plenty of young kids that hang around people that swear and they start swearing. Like it's just little, like kind of the same concept.
Yeah.
But the more time you spend with those people, you're going to start to kind of pick up like the mannerisms, the habits. You're going to start picking up things that they do and kind of subconsciously starting to do those in your own life. And that I think is extremely powerful as well. You're already dropping bombs on us today, but I love it. So, I just really like a lot of what you said there because it just seems like such a simple concept, but it's not easy whatsoever. Like I will tell you firsthand, it was hell. It was hard, but there's going to be times that it gets really difficult. I mean, and that's just natural, but you have to realize that whether there's arguments, whether there's loss of friends, money, any of those things, sleepless nights, like there are things that you have to sacrifice, but be honest with me here. If you gave all of that up, yet you were able to achieve that vision of your future that you actually want, is every second worth it? And that's kind of where I sit because like this whole journey for me has been extremely difficult. I have lost people that I thought was going to be in my wedding, that I thought was going to be with me forever. You know what I mean? But instead, here we are that I'm kind of like here without all those people, yet pursuing a dream that I want for myself because I know that if I get there, every second will be worth it. And that's where, finding that group, like we were just talking about, has really helped me because they understand that loss because they've gone through it too. Finding those people that understand helps so much just because you don't feel alone. And that's a lot kind of also going off like what you were talking about, finding love. Like there's different kinds of love than just like an actual, significant other relationship. Like there's many different, and I'm no expert here, so I'm not going to try to get all scientific, but like there's just different kinds of love and different kinds of relationships that you can have that bring you that feeling of belonging and happiness, like we were just also discussing.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm saying is like leaving that stronghold, getting out of your comfort zone, you have to make room for the good things that are coming. And that's where, we are like what we're discussing now, finding that new group, finding those new things, developing those new habits. Like you talked about, you started reading all of those, you started reading a lot of success literature, doing all this research and stuff like that, which is the next thing that I want to dive into. But, you had to lose those other things to make room for that new adventure you were about to go on. So that's kind of where I also want to segue into that part, is that I know you were talking about, diving into some research, diving into some books. What kind of recommendations would you have for anybody else out there right now, potentially going through a similar situation that you feel really helped you and, that you think would be good ones for them to look into?
Yeah. So it's funny. I actually got all my book recommendations from podcasts. So those who are listening, it's a good place to get your book recommendations. I would listen to the Bigger Pockets podcast. They always recommend a kind of business book, real estate book, or sometimes a life book at the end of the show. That's where I kind of got my my list. But starting out, I would say understanding success in general, the compound effect is a really great one. It just really breaks down success well, and just the core, like success at its foundation is so simple. Like life is simple. You just really need to kind of utilize the compound effect. And I would also say some other books: How to Win Friends and Influence People, The Power of Positive Thinking, Atomic Habits. Kind of similar vein to the compound effect is Atomic Habits, but it breaks down really how to change your habits and what the goal of making a habit really is, which I won't spoil it. Go read the book. Um, but yeah, so I would say those four, and As a Man Thinketh is another good one, and I'll just leave it to those five.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I'm personally in How to Win Friends and Influence People right now. And I mean, I'm not even halfway through, and it just blows my mind. Like some of the things, like it's some of these books, like it's absolutely crazy when you actually dive into them. Like you'll hear them recommended to you, and like it's some sort of like subconscious thing that I've heard mentioned that you have to like hear something recommended to you like 5 to 7 times or something like that before you will actually go and like check it out yourself. So like you'll hear these recommended to you and you kind of just like shrug it off and you're like, oh, it's just another, personal success book, whatever. Like, think of it what you want. But then you dive into them and it's the simplest concepts, but they just break it down in a way that you're like, I mean, you really just sit there and like, for lack of a better term, you kind of feel dumb, but like you and everybody else is missing it. Like it's not it's not just you. Like obviously, if it was that easy, everyone would do it. But the point being that, there really aren't over the top complicated things that these people are doing, and they found the success by doing that. And that's one of the things that I really like about How to Win Friends and Influence People, as well as like the compound effect, like you mentioned. Like it's really just as simple as what's the word? Consistency. Like you just, if you wake up and do the same thing every day, you're going to get better at it. And then over time, it's going to get easier. So maybe you take it a step further and do something a little bit more difficult. And then that becomes easy. That in its sense is compounding. That's it. Like it just gets easier. And then all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're some type of expert and people want to hear you speak and people want to see, what you're doing, all because like you woke up and did something every day. And like obviously that fits different facets, but if it's something that you enjoy, that should come easy to you. So that's where, like the simplicity in it is. The difficult part is staying consistent through those difficult times, like we've also mentioned so far. What I kind of like to call squeeze points, where it really just kind of feels like life just kind of gets you in its hands and just like literally tries to squeeze the life out of you, because it throws just everything at you at once. I mean, it's happened to me numerous times, and it's just like whether you're working a job or a job and class and studying and like a podcast per se or whatever kind of side hustle, something that you're working on, like you have a full plate and then life throws one more thing at you and then one more thing at you and you just literally feel like you can't go any further. It is that point that you must push through because literally where you want to go is right on the other side of that. Like I promise you that is right there. Like that is why it's so difficult, is because life wants to know how bad you want it. And I feel like life is like necessarily the greatest term there. But the point being that there's a lot of us out there kind of asking God, asking the universe, kind of whoever, worship or whatever word you want to use there, like for a sign, for growth, for whatever that is for you, asking for all these things, whether that be more money, more time, like, and obviously that, is another rabbit hole. But point being that we're out here asking for an awful lot of things that we don't realize how hard we have to work to attain. And then when, God or life or whatever you want to call it follows through on that, we're not ready. And that's where, opportunity doesn't wait for you to be ready. And that's where, you really just kind of have to be prepared to seize that moment in whatever form it comes to you. And you can't be surprised when you ask for more and life challenges the crap out of you. Like, there's a lot of us out there that want just something more, me being one of them. Like, there's so many of us that want kind of more than what we're seeing, but we have to be willing to put in the work to achieve that vision. Do you kind of have anything that you want to add to that?
Yeah, man. I think something that's strange that a lot of people do is kind of like when we're asking the universe or God or life or whatever you want to call it, when you're asking for something, you know what you want, which is a really weird thing because you're asking for it because you don't have the confidence or feel empowered enough to go after it. Because, like, you wouldn't ask the universe, if you're living in the United States, for a glass of water. That'd be silly. You would just go get the glass of water. But you ask the universe for things that you feel you're incapable of getting, which is very, very strange because, law of attraction, manifestation, a bunch of woo-woo stuff. I don't know how you feel or how you think about that or how the audience feels or thinks about that. But what is true is that your thoughts really dictate your actions. John Maxwell wrote in a book, I forget which book it is. I think it's Today Matters. In like the first 10 minutes of the book or something like that, he's dropping bombs saying, I hear a lot of people complaining about having a bad day. And I go up to them and I ask them why they had a bad day. They tell me, and he's like, well, what would a good day look like? And they're like, I don't know. And he's like, well, how are you going to have a good day if you don't know what a good day looks like? And so it's just stuff like that where it's like, we know what we want, but we don't feel confident enough and empowered enough to go after it, which is kind of what you were talking about really comes in. It's like, there's work behind what you want and you got to do it, whether you feel empowered or feel confident or not, because the fact of the matter is your thoughts and your actions brought you to where you are. So you probably, and your feelings too, so you probably shouldn't trust them. You should be a little skeptical of them if you're not where you want to be.
Absolutely. And I actually want to bounce back to one of the things that we just talked about earlier there, because I think it's really important to kind of reiterate it here, is the compound effect. Like you just mentioned that we don't feel capable of achieving whatever that vision is. We don't feel like we're worthy, like we're enough, whatever that is. But the most important part is starting. Like that is the hardest and most important part, is starting. But after that point, the compound effect, like we talked about, kind of takes it into its own hands. And what I'm saying here is that when you start today, and I do it again tomorrow, and I do it again the next day, you start to feel more confident. You start to feel like you're getting better at that. If I do 10 push-ups today and 10 push-ups the next day, and then I bust out 20 the third day, I'm going to feel good about it. I'm going to feel better about it. I'm going to feel like I'm getting better. I'm going to feel more confident. The next day, maybe I try for 25. Whatever that looks like for you, the point is that confidence comes from starting. That confidence comes from putting in that work repeatedly And that's why you see these people out on Instagram or out on, TikTok, whatever platform you prefer to use. That's why you see these people out and being just absolutely boisterous about their mission and their vision, because they've worked for years developing that confidence, knowing they know what they're talking about, knowing they've put in the work. That's why they're so confident, because they know they've been through it all. They started where you are right now. Everybody started at a different point. But what we're also kind of shifting back into saying here is, when you change that focus to yourself and you truly discover, inside of yourself what it is that you truly want, like what happens next is absolutely amazing. And like, I've been through it. I know you've been through it. It's just that once you choose that direction and you start to kind of turn the wheels, you start rolling that way, you will just all of a sudden start attracting everything that you wanted. I started rolling down my path, and all of a sudden, just magically, a mentor appears into my life. And I had to approach him still. Like, the opportunity was there, but I had to take it. I still had to approach him. And then the things, kind of carried themselves from there. But, all of a sudden, a mentor comes in. All of a sudden, new connections come in. Like, just miraculously, things will start happening, but you have to start. All of those things all tie back into compounding, because that is the momentum that you're carrying to take yourself to whatever that vision looks like for you. And like I said, you just have to be not necessarily prepared for them, but be prepared to recognize them. That's where I didn't have a clue what I was doing. But in that moment, in that time, I realized that's the guy. I need to get a hold of him. I need to get a call with him. I need something. And then, whatever happens after that is out of my control. But what I can do right now is make sure that I reach out to him. So I did. So then, he was a super nice guy. We scheduled a call. The rest is kind of history. But point being that I knew that was my opportunity. I didn't know what was going to happen after that, but I knew in that moment that I had to make something happen there, or I was going to be right where I was yesterday. And like, there's obviously only so much that we can do by ourselves. But point being, like, you don't know what that opportunity is going to look like, but just be prepared to recognize it and be prepared to take action on it.
There we go. I love that. I love that.
Every once in a while, I say something good on here, Like, yeah, man. So far, I'm loving this conversation. I mean, so much value in it so far. Here, I kind of want to bounce back to your story a little bit more. And I know we talked about finding that group of people. I know we talked about leaving your stronghold, but now I kind of want to talk about like where you are now, kind of looking back on that journey a little bit. What do you feel like was, I mean, aside from that moment where, you had the podcast on and you felt like that was your message, kind of aside from that moment, where do you feel like you really realized that you turned that corner?
Yeah. Yeah, man. I would say I really turned the corner. So I left the stronghold and I joined Young Life, which is funny because you got to be careful in life, because you and your problems exist together. So when you try to leave your problems, you got to remember that half of the equation is still there, and that's you. And what happens was I recreated the stronghold that was football in Young Life. And so, I thought it was for like noble reasons, as was football. Football was for like building wealth for my family. Young Life was like growing in love, growing spiritually. And I'm not saying that stuff didn't happen. I did grow spiritually. I did grow in my ability to love others and receive love. But you get caught doing things that you don't want to do to get things that you want. And I'm not saying that you're always going to want to do the things you need to do to get to where you want to be, but there are necessary things and then there are unnecessary things. And you have to be a really good thinker to discern between the two. And it's like, was Young Life the only way for me to receive love and to grow spiritually and to grow in love? Well, absolutely not. There was a way to do that that was very much in line with my passions and my goals and would have taken me further. But I was stuck in a community, and I was like, that was the only like community I had. Now, don't get me wrong. I love those people. They're still some of my dearest friends. But the lifestyle we were living wasn't the lifestyle I wanted to live. And I felt stuck in that lifestyle. Not stuck in the relationship, stuck in the lifestyle. And so once I realized that, it was about junior year in college, I made a commitment to myself that I wasn't going to do that again when I graduated. Once I graduated, it was done. No more strongholds. If I came to a realization that I was forming a stronghold around me or entering into another one, I would leave it. And it happened again, actually. I quit. I didn't quit. I graduated college, became a realtor to make money for my family. And immediately, um, like within a couple weeks of being a realtor, I had taken massive action towards being a realtor too. Like I was talking to people, I was cold calling, I was doing this, I was doing that, I was holding open houses and all this stuff. And I was just like, I hate this. This isn't fun. And I came across this dude, carrot.com. I think his name is like Trevor Bond or something like that. He's the CEO of Carrot. He does an energy audit. And I did my energy audit. What gives me energy? What drains energy? And I think everybody needs to do that energy audit multiple times a year because we can always slip into doing the things and compromising with the things that drain our energy. Do your energy audit, like of the activities you do in your day, how much of it gives you energy, how much drains your energy. And the thing is, my energy was being drained by like 80% of my activities, 90% of my activities. My day was only giving me energy 10% of the time, which that's why I'm miserable. So I was like, okay, what gives me energy? The podcast. And so making that commitment post grad to really not step into strongholds helped me to pivot faster from being a realtor. I would have gotten financial success as a realtor, but there's just like there's more than one type of love, there's more to success than just finances. And I was like, I'm not going to have golden handcuffs. Pivoted from being a realtor, switched over to a daily podcast with the goal of maximizing the things that give me energy. And I was like monetizing that to still go towards my goals. Like, what can give me energy and lead me to my goal? Because it's important to enjoy the, like, just on an inherent value-based level. Not always find it fun, but to enjoy it and get fulfillment from the process. And so that's kind of what led me to where I'm at now. It was a commitment to myself to not enter into any strongholds. And if I do, to not tolerate them and leave them immediately.
Dude, I love what you just said so much. Like, I honestly can't like honestly explain like in words, but like, man, it's just trying to like unpack it here and decide exactly how I want to attack my response. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
um, like it's just crazy to me the way it all works. I just don't. I still can't wrap my head around all of it. Like, and honestly, I'm probably never going to. But like, some of us all think like I'll even openly admit to this. Like, I remember in high school hearing about like the Myers-Briggs tests, hearing about like all those little different like tests and stuff you could take online, like that are going to tell you what job you'd be best fit in, like different stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, whatever. Like, I openly admit to that. But then, like literally earlier this year, I had to take a few of those for class, a bunch of different assessments and stuff as far as like leadership profiles and things go. And like even just the one you just mentioned, I haven't taken it. But what I'm trying to say here is you learn a lot more than you think from those things. And it's little stuff that you know about yourself, but you choose to ignore it, whether that be on something that you just don't want to believe or something that somebody else believes for you. And what I mean by that is kind of like what we were talking about earlier, where, we were kind of stuck in that stronghold, that identity because of what we thought everybody else wanted. But what I'm saying here is in taking some little assessments like that, you'll find out little things about yourself that you really knew, but kind of refused to acknowledge. And it helps you kind of change your mindset a little bit where you're like, all right, like maybe it is time that I start looking at this differently because like I already knew that I was like that. But now that you say it, makes me think I should pursue something more along that direction. And that's where like you're talking about the energy audit here, that I actually really love the concept because there's a lot of us out there that I think have a very similar scenario to the one that you were in, that like we're doing everything we think we need to be doing, but we're dead tired, we're miserable, and we don't want to do it. And like I'm not necessarily saying that there's anything wrong with that because like I don't know everybody's specific scenario, but what I am saying is that sometimes you have to kind of make that sacrifice like you're talking about. Like you spent all that time, going, grinding just to become a realtor, be a successful realtor, find that version of success for yourself. But then you got there and you realized, okay, this isn't quite what I thought it was. And I feel like that happens to a lot of us too. There's a lot of us that go, to a college institution, go get a big job, realize we hate it. And, like there's nothing wrong with that. That's just your story. Like that's just your journey. Now you now have to find, like as you did, you have to find what does give you energy and figure out how you can use that. That's what we're doing right now. We're finding the things that energize us. We're finding the things that we like to do, and we're trying to figure out what we can do with that so that we can serve that vision for us, for our family, but also enjoy doing it. Because if I'm going to get up every day and I'm going to talk to you or another guest or whatever it is, and I'm going to have fun doing it, I'm going to be excited to get out of bed and do it the next day. If I'm going to get out of bed and crunch numbers every day and have somebody with a barrel to my head to get me to do it, I'm not going to be excited to get up the next day to do it all over again. Like it seems simple. It seems simple, but when you're going through it, obviously I know it's much more complicated. But what I'm saying is some of us kind of, no matter how hard we try, are going to have a moment like that we realize we've been chasing this vision for so long. And then we get there and we realize that, okay, this isn't quite what I thought. But realize that in that vision, there was something that you were after. And that whether that be the happiness, whether that whatever that was, find that. Like we were saying, we were looking for something that we were enjoying, but also provided the, like obviously financial security, but also provided like the things that we needed and wanted. So, find what you thought you would enjoy about that, pursue that a little bit further, pick out that thing for you, to find out what you're going to enjoy. And sometimes you have to take a pay cut. Sometimes you kind of have to give and take on those things. But like you said right now, like you switched to a daily podcast. Like honestly, there's not a lot of people that do that. So first of all, kudos to you. I'm on a weekly, so good for you. But what I'm saying is that like you didn't exactly know what that was going to look like, but you knew that you found energy doing it, that you enjoy doing it, and that you want to get better at it. You want to be good at it. So now you're going to go put in the work to be that guy, and then you're going to figure out how to monetize what you like doing to provide that future for yourself. And that's what I really love in there. That like you got there and you realized it wasn't for you, but you didn't just stop. You realized like, okay, this isn't it. Now what? Okay, obviously I got to do something here. What can we do? And you found what you wanted to do. And now you're working to obviously achieve that vision in that. And I just think that's such a powerful thing that a lot of us are like afraid to pursue the thing we like because somebody else doesn't want us to. And that's just not the way to go, man. Like I don't really know how else to word it. Like it's just you're not going to be fulfilled, and it's not going to pan out for you. Like yeah, maybe you'll find all the money you want, but if you're miserable going to work every day, you're not going to feel whole. And there's just really nothing that we can do about that. So, I hope that in what we said here that some of you guys do find a little bit more confidence to just pursue whatever that thing is that you enjoy. There's a million and one ways to just about monetize anything nowadays. So, do some research, figure out what it is, and find a way to make money doing what you like doing. I just think that is so important. I know all of us know the old adage or whatever you want to call it, that like nothing worth having comes easy. And I feel like we've talked about a lot kind of today, just, in the amount of work that is required to achieve that vision. But like, it really is true. And that's where like, like I'm sure you could even tell us, like you're making the shift into a daily podcast. I doubt you're going to tell us it's easy.
Yeah, man. It's definitely not easy. There are things you can do to kind of make your life easier while you're doing it. But I would say the hardest part, the things that you run into the most, comes in when it's like you attacking yourself when you're pursuing your dreams and goals, listening to kind of all the negativity, because like the actual process, like actual taking action, um, is typically pretty easy. Like there's usually steps that you need to do that aren't the most physically taxing, that aren't the most like complicated steps. And every now and then the steps are like actually hard, but it's probably because you haven't learned something, which means you need to go get a mentor. But yeah, typically the action steps are fairly easy. What's hard is beating yourself, like in your mind, like getting to the point where you're like, okay, I'm thinking really negatively about this podcast right now because it hasn't blown up like I expected it to. I need to stay consistent. I know that I love doing this. So even if I don't feel like doing it right now, let me stay true to the commitment to myself to do it because I know I love this. I know I love it. I might just be a little tired from my W-2, which I don't like. And so there's that kind of, always prioritizing yourself and listening to yourself over the negativity of others. I think that's where the hardest part comes in because you're always going to be bombarded with doubt and negativity from outside and inside. It's like fighting a war on two fronts. It seems impossible. So,
Absolutely. Like just another thing that is just so powerful that you just said. Like you're always going to have like those thoughts. Like you're always going to have that. And just finding kind of ways to minimize that is really where you're going to make your money, essentially. Like figure of speech, not exactly. But anyway, what I mean is that like you made the shift into starting a daily podcast and you knew it wasn't going to be easy, but you knew you enjoyed it. So that's step one. But now you're at the point that you're like, okay, I have to stay consistent with this, and that's going to help me monetize this. So here's step two. Now I have to take action on it. But that's where I'm saying, like, it's a lot easier, one, to continue doing it if you like it, as we've mentioned. But two, it's that every once in a while we all kind of need that reminder of why we're doing it. And you kind of have to sit back, like you're gonna get frustrated, you're gonna get angry, you're gonna sit back and you're gonna have days where you're just like, why in the world am I still even trying this? Like it's not working, I'm frustrated, I've lost X amount of money, it's not working. But you have to remember your why. You have to remember whether that be setting up a strong financially secure life for your children, like whatever your why is. Like remember why you started. That is the most important thing. Do not lose sight of that, or you're never gonna, like, that has to be the reason you're going. That your why has to be strong enough to carry you through those squeeze points as we've talked about. Delayed gratification is really the hardest thing, because in the world that we live in today, everything is boom, 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 boom. Like we can get anything that we want, like, I mean, either on the internet immediately, or Amazon helps us get it within a couple of days. So like point being, like whatever that is, like we can have it now. And like with something like this, like if you have a bigger vision for your family, or anything for yourself, all of it, whatever that is, it takes time and it's gonna be difficult. But that's why like what we're saying is it has to be important enough to you to continue doing that through those hard times. And you have to like it enough, and you have to know that this is truly what I want to do. And I know that that's really difficult for some of us, as like we're groomed by the time we're like 10 years old to supposedly know what we're going to do when we grow up. And some of us don't figure it out until we're in our 30s. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that we're expected to know, but we're not going to know unless we go try. And like, that's one of the things that I really liked about the part of your story that you shared so far, is even though, you were out there pursuing, grinding that vision you had for yourself, you were trying and failing, trying and failing. And like, you realize you're doing things wrong. And that's also one of the big things that we kind of talk about here on the show is failure. Like your mistakes aren't you to quit. Your mistakes are there to remind you to be a better version of yourself next time. What that's like there for you to learn from. That's where like one of the things I talked about with my last guest is he brought up an analogy that if I try and succeed, I learn three things. if I try and fail, I learn 10 things. And I was like, well, shoot, I want to go out there and lose. like, like, I want to learn 10 things every time because that's exponential. Well, I mean, not that three can't be, but it's slower, like, and I understand, it's not all about speed, but at the same time, like you learn so much more from your failures than you do from success. When you learn from success, you're like, okay, this works. When you learn from failure, you're like, okay, why didn't this work? Because I did this wrong, because I did this wrong. And like I said, it's not reasons for you to stop trying. It's just showing you what you need to fix. Like that's what you have to learn. That's the journey. Like we talked about, like being broke. Like, yeah, that's really difficult. Don't get me wrong. Like you have to figure out ways to make money, especially in school. It's difficult. But being broke is part of the game. Everybody was here at one time or another. Staying broke, that's a personal thing because there's, as I said, a billion different ways out there now that you can find something. And don't get me wrong, like I don't know everybody's story. I know everybody is extremely busy, but a lot of it kind of comes back to how bad you want it. And I don't want to like sound like I'm calling anybody out, but I'm trying to motivate you to take action despite whatever that is. And that's where like I also really like the energy audit that we talked about, which I'm probably going to be plugging that, more than once here. But just like finding what gives you energy is like so important. Like I literally can't stress that enough. I just cannot. Um anyway, we'll shift it back here. Value packed episode so far. Timmy, you've been an absolute rock star for us, but I do think it's about time to start winding it down. I know you're a busy guy. So in kind of wrap up here, one question that I always like to ask the guests is that if you could go back and have a conversation with yourself during that ground zero moment, what do you think you would tell yourself in that conversation?
I would tell myself to become very well acquainted with who you are and not who you think you need to be, but who you actually are, the things you actually enjoy, and then just do that because it's so much better to be fulfilled doing what you feel like led to do, called to do, what you feel is in alignment with you, whatever the verbiage you like to use. When you can bring your authentic self to the table and go where that authentic self is celebrated, it's the best feeling in the world. Because I think all of us at our core, when we break it down to our just pure authenticity, we are entrepreneurs because all entrepreneurs do is solve problems. And if we all want to solve problems and serve other people in amazing ways and be fulfilled in that way, when that kind of problem that we want to solve meets our authentic self, there's very few things in the world that can stop you from moving forward. Really, there's only one that I can think of, and it's you. So that's what I would tell myself.
You seem like you might have rehearsed that a little bit, but anyway, I kind of want to break that down just for a second here because I just want to make sure that everybody understands exactly what you're talking about here. That a lot of us, who do you enjoy being around the most? I mean, is it your mom? Is it your best friend? Is it your brother? Whoever, whether anything. And why? I feel like a lot of us enjoy being around that person, or I mean, maybe even just being in a place. Like maybe it's not with a person, but a lot of us like enjoy being in that environment because we can be our most authentic self in that space. And that's where I think what you just mentioned is extremely powerful because that's what you should look for in a career, in a job. Like find that space, that place that you can be your authentic self. Because if you show up to work every day and you are being nothing but you all day long, you're going to show up every day. But if you're showing up to work every day and you got to put on a face and act like all these other people that you don't actually like and try to fit in and do all these things, you're just going to drain yourself and you're going to be miserable. So that's where I think it's extremely important, especially for people like in, college age position that maybe haven't quite graduated yet, or, any of those things that really take that, like, it takes time and nobody really wants to just sit down and do it. But if you spend that time to truly like dig internally and find out what you want and who you are, like, it is going to pay dividends for you for the rest of your life. And that's what we're saying, because if you can start that early, you're doing better than literally 70% of the workforce right now. Like, because I mean, I don't know the actual statistical numbers, but I know it's a majority of people that don't enjoy their job. And that's what we're saying. Like, take the time, just sit down, bring a notepad, whatever that is, maybe turn on a podcast, like, do something that gets you thinking about your life, about your future, and really just internalize it. I know a lot of like my stuff kind of like when I was doing that came from podcasts, because I mean wanted to learn about wealth, and I wanted to learn about how to make money, different things like that. So I, turned to podcasts because I found that was a good medium for it. And I would hear other people tell their stories, and they would talk about their thoughts and patterns at the time. And I'm like, you know what? Actually, I really like that. I like that a lot. I think that. And then you learn what things you identify with. You truly kind of find what those things mean to you. Maybe somebody else will say, "Oh, well, I wanted to own a Lamborghini one day," and you say, "I don't care if I own a Lamborghini. I'm perfectly happy with a Toyota." There you go. Like that, in essence, is what we're talking about. And I just wanted to try and help kind of break that down. Like, your explanation was tremendous. Like, I just want to say that, but I just wanted to kind of break it down just in case, it kind of got lost there. I know there were some big words, but um
No, always
anyway,
good to reiterate for the people listening.
absolutely. So with that, to me, I just want to say thank you so much again, man. You came on and totally rocked the stage today. I mean, this has been nonstop value from start to finish. So thank you so much for just being willing to come on and share your story and your experiences. And I mean, just every bit of advice that you've had for us today. So thank you. And with that, everyone, always remember, this is Dream Chasers Ground Zero, and there's nowhere to go from here but up. Thanks, guys.